The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and welcome to the APICS Vendor Webcast, ready for 2019? Harness the power of
technologies. So to get started with today's session, we will first talk about the supply chain issues that we see in the field. So of those common issues, we will begin upstream and then move downstream throughout an organization's supply chain. Because delivery accuracy is a key metric on many of your customer supplier scorecards, this metric is one of the ways your customer will measure your performance and decide if they want to continue doing business with you. Both internally and externally, delivery accuracy can be a warning sign of problems throughout the supply chain. All organizations would like to strive for high delivery accuracy, but in order to achieve those high accuracy levels, accountability begins at the top with leadership and flows down to the employees of the organization. Next, to counter against inventory discrepancies, organizations typically carry unneeded levels of inventory, increasing carrying costs and compounding the issues. We have seen low inventory accuracy levels due to the inadequate use of ERP tools or organizations relying on year-end full physical inventory to shore up their numbers. With inventory accuracy issues causing time, cost, and decreased customer satisfaction, although some organizations view it as an additional cost, periodic cycle counts have saved organizations countless dollars in the end. With that, if inventory accuracy isn't high, personnel within organizations are essentially creating wasteful activities. To expand on that topic, if some of the things that we can do to mitigate this issue is to ensure that we have accurate bills of materials, ensuring that items are in the correct inventory locations, tools and fixtures are properly planned and tracked, among other things such as supply items and consumables, which are often overlooked. For forecast accuracy, we have all heard the phrase that forecasts are never accurate. Although this may be the case, organizations have tools and can communicate with their business partners to reduce the forecast error. In the organizations we work with, because forecast errors are so large, purchasers and planners do not trust the forecast within their application, resulting in planning outside of the system. This approach results into excess inventory that becomes damaged and obsolete, or that they don't carry enough inventory that extends lead times, leading to unhappy customers and lost sales opportunities. Regarding the issue of throughput, bottlenecks, rejections, and reworks can mean a difference between meeting your production targets and missing out on future opportunities. Also, organizations that try to operate in large time intervals typically encounter capacity issues, limiting their ability to be proactive and to achieve optimal operational efficiencies. One approach we at Ultra Consultants have used to increase throughput is through process mapping and value stream mapping. By mapping out the current state process of an operation and identifying the problem areas, organizations can then create a value stream map, pull data from their ERP application, compare that information with demonstrated values using time studies, and then make adjustments to their ERP data, or just completely remove those non-value-added activities. Finally, without closely communicating and collaborating with your suppliers, an organization will not be able to consistently meet their changing customer demands. For those of you that use supplier scorecards, supplier performance isn't solely based on on-time delivery. We must also consider pricing, flexibility, reliability, and most importantly, quality. Yes, a late order can impact a customer delivery time and accuracy, but if that order is late and it doesn't meet your specification, that issue is further compounded. Through approaches such as collaborative design with engineering and product development departments, we can reduce the cost of poor quality throughout the supply chain. With the number of supply chain disruptions that occur at any point within the supply chain, one way I've demonstrated this both in the classroom as well as in the boardroom is through a simulation called the beer game. Developed through a group of MIT professors back in the 1960s, the beer game is a gamification technique that demonstrates the importance of sharing data and information among business partners throughout the supply chain. Going back to our discussion of supply chain issues, if customers shared their long-range forecast with their vendors, these manufacturers and distributors in turn could make adjustments to their forecasts and capacity plans, share that information with their vendors, third-party providers, and subcontractors, where they could also make adjustments. This knowledge sharing benefits all business partners within the supply chain in that each party can be more proactive, create more accurate forecasts, have accurate inventory levels, ultimately maximizing their profits and reducing their operating costs. In another interesting conversation, on December 18th, I'll be discussing the bullwhip effect again when we explore the impact of blockchain and ERP for manufacturers and distributors. To sign up for that webinar, as well as other webinars, please go to ultraconsultants.com/ERP-education to see all upcoming events. So how do we counter against the risk of the bullwhip effect? Through visibility, collaboration, and communication among all business partners within the supply chain, each company can streamline and optimize their operations. So for this next slide, some of you are familiar with the classic collaborative planning, forecasting, and replenishment diagram. I also like to present this diagram because I feel that this is the true definition of visibility, collaboration, and communication throughout the supply chain. Also, some of you may know there's an update to this model with CPFR 2.0, where we now can use marketing and social media to further reduce the bullwhip effect. In reviewing the diagram, even though we have people and processes to improve supply chain collaboration, ERP tools such as customer and supplier portals, supplier scorecards, workflows, and EDI can allow an organization to improve those metrics we outlined at the beginning of the discussion. So to wrap up this section of the presentation, to achieve operational excellence, we must assess our current state situation. The maturity model here is a great high-level depiction on how incremental improvements can improve market share and margins for an organization. And although there are many maturity models that have spawned from the DoD's capability maturity model, Ultra's maturity model that we use in the field is another great example that includes the people, process, and the information technology aspects of an organization to assess their current state maturity and to create a benchmark. So next, Louis Columbus will share IQMS's findings in the supply chain survey his organization conducted. Louis?
Thank you very much, Justin. I appreciate it. Thanks for the excellent overview of those key concepts, and thank you everyone for taking time to be on this webinar today. I want to first of all reflect on a couple things that Justin brought up. First of all, what we found in our survey reflects overall exactly what he was talking about, which is the fact that when you look at accuracy, throughput, and collaboration together, companies are really looking at how can they overall out-innovate competitors. And so by attempting to out-innovate competitors, what they're doing is more and more looking at things like collaborative planning, forecasting, replenishment, and they're progressing on that maturity model that Justin ended on. And the purpose that drives companies up that maturity model to ascend that maturity model is because it's all about out-innovating competitors with greater knowledge. And I thought it was an outstanding point about supplier collaboration, because all the portals and all that ability to make data move faster has a faster return on sales. In fact, when I was at AMR, we looked at the impact of distributed order management on reducing inventory turns and then increasing return on assets, on return on invested capital. And it was pretty significant with regard to the more that you can distribute and collaborate across the supply chain, the faster you get to a higher ROIC, return on invested capital. And this all leads into the survey that we did. We interviewed 151 North American manufacturers, and what we found was exactly, I think to Justin's point, is that 27% of these manufacturers are going 10% a year faster than their peers. Now, manufacturing right now is going through quite a period of growth. I mean, if you track any type of the unbiased metrics in the market or indices in the market, PMI, it's all moving very quickly towards more and more of a growth spurt overall. And so what we're seeing is that the companies at the very top, at the very apex, who have got the greatest growth going on, they completely understand supply chain integration, and the faster data moves and the faster that they generate knowledge, and that the quicker that they can make data turn into knowledge and insight, it's a competitive advantage. It's all about being able to out-innovate competitors. And you're starting to see more and more supply chains compete on knowledge and insight. And so what came out of the data that we gathered in the survey was that those that were able to orchestrate analytics and BI, real-time monitoring, to get a rich real-time data stream inbound into the systems that are going ahead and planning inventory and doing CPFR, and even advanced things like vendor managed inventory and distribution-centric models. All those things made a tremendous difference, in addition to mobility and the ability to respond to customers as well. And I think Justin set up a great point, is that today more and more companies realize they're competing in the time that their customers perceive as the most important time benchmark there is. And that's a really good thing. And that's one of the things that's driving, I think, manufacturing growth, is that manufacturers realize they can't look at metrics. They can't have metrics that look only inside the four walls of the manufacturing plant. They've got to take into account that perspective on time and respect that time view of their customers, regardless if they're B2B or B2C. In keeping with that, these high growth manufacturers, we found, are exceptionally good at launching new products and services. I mean, they have this down into a DNA. So all the way back to the suppliers, all the way through into the distribution channel, these people never have out of stock conditions on a launch. I mean, they're very, very good at forecasting, and they're able to go ahead and plan this. And one of the most exciting things about the survey, quite frankly, was the rise of smart connected products with IoT and Wi-Fi sensors enabled, that generate what's called servitization, or products as a service, that inbound data. That's happening right now, and it's moving really quickly. And it's further fuel for supply chain integration. They also are galvanized in their belief in quality, and they will double down on quality. One CEO of a small mid-tier manufacturer I went to visit, who was a respondent, said, you know, well, I'll spend $3 on quality for every dollar on marketing. Quality is the best marketing I have. And I thought that that was pretty much on target with the rest of the way the world is seeing quality right now. So they were basically tripling down the spend on quality across suppliers than they were on marketing and saying quality. They thought, well, quality is going to be the best advertising I have. And what we're also seeing is that there's more and more tracking of yield rates by machine. More and more manufacturers are looking at overall equipment effectiveness, not as much as some of the baseline aspects. But given the high growth nature of manufacturing right now, some companies actually just can't slow down to get things done. So where they turn is to analytics, first of all. And what we're seeing is this combination effect in these high growth manufacturers, that 27% growing at 10% a year or more, those top 10% of those, that high growth strata of these manufacturers, they're taking analytics and they're combining real-time data with it, and they're peeling back the whys of why can't they achieve more? Why can't they produce more? Why can't they be more accurate? To Justin's point, why can't they have greater collaboration and overall throughput? And the combination of analytics and real-time monitoring are giving them those answers. So they're able to go ahead and define production capacity with a lot greater precision, a lot greater acuity. Real-time data is now a reality in 82% of the manufacturers we interviewed. And there are early adopters who are very adept at IoT adoption as well as Wi-Fi adoption. And those technologies, while they get a tremendous amount of coverage right now in the industry media, those are incidental to building a rich, real-time, contextually relevant data stream that you can build supply chain and shop floor strategies around. And that's what we're seeing, is that preservation and that strengthening of the data stream to be able to do things like improve product quality and demand forecasting, and be able to have a very interactive model going on CPFR. And to Justin's point, that maturity model, the faster data moves in that maturity model, the faster the overall growth goes. Real-time monitoring is really where manufacturers that we've seen that struggle with transitioning off of single user systems, QuickBooks, you'd be surprised. I mean, there are 40, 50, and $60 million manufacturers running on QuickBooks, and they're bursting at the seams because the systems cannot scale for what they're trying to do. But real-time monitoring is the epiphany point for a lot of those manufacturers. They see we're improving scheduling accuracy, building better inventory control, and the points of this overall graphic. But the really great thing about real-time monitoring is when you go visit manufacturers and you say, well, how did you know about scrap, and how did you know what was driving scrap on the shop floor? And they said, well, we started doing real-time monitoring of all of our shifts, and then we started to actually peer into the data even further by machine, and we found out why scrap was where it was, or why RMAs were where they were, hence the drive for greater quality, hence the drive for greater overall supply chain collaboration to drive quality up. Real-time monitoring also is the table stakes for being able to drive inventory more effectively, and for being able to look at being able to move products with greater precision through production. And even, we see this, it's really fascinating because you see real-time monitoring paying off extremely fast in process-oriented issues like plastics, but also in engineered order and configured order. Real-time monitoring is allowing companies for the first time to be collaborators in creation with their customers. In other words, what they do is they have the opportunity to go ahead and provide real-time updates on orders where they hadn't had that opportunity before. And so they're getting into the step of accuracy from the customer's perspective. And so these metrics that we're going to talk about, it's all about respecting that customer's perspective of time, and it's all about taking everything in a manufacturing operation and a supply chain operation and removing anything that's extraneous that doesn't drive higher quality or better responsiveness or even greater transparency back to a customer. So mobile ERP access, what was really interesting, another fascinating point out of the data is that when you cross-tab mobile access with compliance and quality, you find that the most regulated industries, they're so consumed and they are so obsessed with quality and compliance, they use mobile devices to monitor their compliance in real time, which I found absolutely fascinating because that means there are people walking around shop floors making sure that they're staying in step with compliance requirements. This is a medical products manufacturer. At IQMS, we have companies that generate medical products that have to stay within compliance for different federal governments. We have aerospace and defense companies as well. But the fact that they're using mobile devices, they're that obsessed with data. If you watch people check email, when you're in line at a store or something, this is what quality engineers are doing on the shop floor. They're checking compliance, they're checking quality. They're obsessed with, this is the best companies on the planet. They have this obsession and they fuel this obsession with data accuracy and operational efficiencies, and it is part of their lexicon. And everybody has ownership of it. And we'll talk about change management later. in this webinar. So the other thing we wanted to do a pulse check on is how do you measure product quality measurement? And there's really no surprises on this chart because scrap by type and cause is typically how the majority of manufacturers measure that. Analyzing RMAs, that's pretty simple to do. That's been going on for decades in manufacturing, if not, centuries. Non-compliance and corrective action and supplier and inbound levels. But as you progress down this, the methods get increasingly more real-time centric. And what we did was we started to peel back this and we said, okay, what about OEE and its progression and its importance today and in the future? And what we found was that manufacturers more and more are looking at the individual machine performance, and they're saying, well, if I replace that with a smart machine, I would know SPC levels inside the machine real time, and I would be able to optimize that machine in the overall context of my overall production flow. Therefore, I'd be able to generate a higher return on invested capital. Therefore, I'd be able to meet customer expectations, and I'd be able to exceed customer expectations with the core metrics that we're going to talk about. But, so there's the high-end aspect, paradoxically, at the bottom of this, that these manufacturers are going after analytics to really normalize their complex machines, and those machines are getting really smart. And then at the upper end, this is where a lot of companies start their quality journey. They use metrics and analytics to peel back why. Why is scrap so high? Why is 50% of the orders going out, on time when we want 90 to 100%? Asking the whys is where analytics and real-time monitoring together are giving the companies these answers. And what is really interesting about that is that there's one manufacturer who had those metrics, and they were only selling in 3 or 4 countries. When they solved that problem, they started selling in 40 different countries globally and started signing up distributors because now they could meet and exceed the expectations and the commitments they made to customers. So the 5 most important supply chain metrics: delivery in full and on time, another word for perfect order. Perfect order performance in a high-performing company is going to run over 90%, 95%. The median, it varies by industry, sub-industry, and manufacturing, but it hovers around 80%. Some companies, before they move into more of an automated approach and they try to basically brute force this with manual tools, are hovering around 50 and 60%. It's not good. That means competitors are picking up the excess capacity, and it's leaving a lot of money on the table instead of being able to excel on every order. Forecast accuracy, the overall measure of the forecast usefulness, and it's important, I think, to Justin's point, is to look at accuracy in collaboration as this triad of speed, scale, and clarity, because the forecast accuracy sends a message through the channel as well, and it sends a message throughout the entire value chain of a company. It sends a message about how well things are running. Forecast accuracy, out of that data that we generated, is the single greatest determinant if a company is going to excel at a new product introduction launch or not. How good they are at this and managing expectations and accumulating expectations, and then being able to reflect that by integrating their PLM, CAD, CRM, and ERP systems together to build a cohesive configuration lifecycle strategy, is to the extent that they succeed at it. Supplier performance, and I think to Justin's excellent point, this spans quality, this spans delivery timeframes, this spans how well are they contributing knowledge into the overall ecosystem. Suppliers are incredibly valuable to manufacturers for being able to learn how to out-innovate competitors. Suppliers more than ever are being relied on to help out-innovate competitors, create new ideas. Inventory accuracy is how well is the engine running, how well is that internal engine running, of keeping in touch with the suppliers, distributor order management systems, how accurate are they, how well are those processes defined, and then finally manufacturing throughput or overall performance of the overall production system itself. So those are the 5 metrics. And moving on to the next segment, I'd like to introduce you to Jeff Holfeld of Northern Industrial Manufacturing, who's going to give you some real-world scenarios with regard to supply chain management.
Thank you, Louis, and thank you all for joining us today. Louis and Justin brought up a bunch of good points, and about 5 or 6 years ago, like many of you, I was asking, me and my team were asking ourselves why the whys of quality and what production metrics are going to take us to the next level. And it was at that point where we began our ERP and transformational journey to ultimately end up selecting IQMS as our ERP platform. Northern Industrial Manufacturing is a 40-year-old automotive power transmission supplier of basically round metal flat parts. We stamp, grind, media finish all in-house, and the parts that we supply are in general for the automotive industry to customers like General Motors, ZF, Daimler, Detroit Diesel, Magna Powertrain, Borg Warner, Ricardo, to name a few. What's interesting about us, we started our ERP journey about 5 years ago, and it was actually at that time where we also started transforming our organization. And ironically, during the time of implementing IQMS, since implementing IQMS, all 5 years we've been awarded the General Motors Supplier Excellence Award. And what this is for 100% on-time delivery, 0 parts per million in terms of defects supplied to General Motors, and then a level of excellence in engineering support. And we've also, in 2013, were awarded the ZF Supplier of the Year, all at the same time while adapting our IQMS system. So what I wanted to run through to you is a variety of different ways where we kind of stood looking at our organization and have really enhanced the different aspects of our production floor, as Louis was alluding to. And the way we did that was through lab and production traceability, through control and understanding certifications from our suppliers and the certs that we're supplying to our customers. Our transition to IATF 6949, which for those who aren't in the auto space would be the equivalent of ISO 9000 up to 2016. And then understanding the new rules with these new ISOs, which requires suppliers to maintain the final audit documentation. We've got to retain that now. I believe it's for 40 years, if not indefinite, due to some of the recalls for the airbags and things of that nature in the automotive industry. So one of the primary things that we did was for lot and production traceability. And through our IQMS system, what we've done is we allow the system and we leverage the system to take care of a lot of the nitty-gritty details. And what do I mean by that? What we do is we have a label that prints out at the primary production point, and that label has barcodes that are printed right out of the system, some key dimensions, dates, lot numbers. And then from there, the schedule is produced by a plant manager or by somebody in scheduling. And as you can see on the right, those also have barcodes. And as the operational employees begin to production report the different lots, they're able to use a conventional barcode scanning technology to scan in a work order, which then queues up that work order for being able to production report. And what this allowed us to do is get a tremendous visibility into what's being produced, when is it being produced, and at the end of the day, we could go into our system and in basic real time determine what's being produced, how much is being produced, and it allows us to ensure certain metrics are met in terms of production. Did we get that hot order out, or is it something that didn't get out today and we want to make sure it got out tomorrow? Before implementing IQMS in our ERP solution, we were finding ourselves having to go run around trying to catch someone before they left to try to figure out what was made and if that customer order was going to be processed. The other thing that we've done is we've gone to basically ordering out of our ERP system and ensuring that our quality certifications, these are the certs brought in from our heat treat suppliers, from our raw material providers. We actually place a PO within the system, and then we're taking those certs and we're actually allocating those certs or replacing those certs into the actual purchase order. And those purchase orders and certs are retained forever because it's now digital. And we're no longer having to manage the warehouses full of boxes and having the destruction records because we're running out of space. So at any given time, if a customer calls and either complains or we don't have the customers complain, no customers complain, right? They just call and tell us how great we're doing. But if we wanted the specifics on that great shipment, all we do is we're 2 clicks away from having the ability to know the certification and making sure that the raw material was not only checked in, but received properly. The other thing that we've leveraged in our IQMS system was in our transition to this new IATF 16949. Prior to implementing the system, like many of you, you probably weren't using the fax machines like we are still, but you probably have a lot of binders that are controlling your system, your quality system, and your various work instructions, things of that nature. We ended up having binders and binders and binders of these work instructions, and if there was ever a change made in one of these work instructions, oftentimes you and your team may find yourselves making changes to the 3 or 4 binders out across your plants, and in some cases many more than that. So what we've done is actually taken those binders and implemented a very controlled, very tight document control process where we've now digitized those. And because we're so ingrained with our ERP system, we now have the capability of bringing up all of those binders and being able to access those all throughout our plant. This really allows us tremendous visibility and access to the documents. And when it's time for a change, instead of taking 2 or 3 hours to go find each book, you sometimes have to go across the state to find one of the books if you're multi-plant. We make one change in the system, it gets routed to the proper authorities, and once it's approved, everybody now has instant access. The last primary way that we've really enhanced our system is through the final audit and through this retention of the documentation that's now required by the governing bodies. In the old, prior to implementing IQMS, we found ourselves using what were called digital processors, DPs, and this would spit out data and it would look just like you see there. A bunch of numbers on a piece of paper. That piece of paper would be retained, stapled to our traveler for a 12 to 16 month period, and then it would be thrown away, sent to the shredder. What we've done now is IQMS has allowed us ahead of time to put in the key metrics of our parts. For example, in many cases, we might make 2, 3, 10, 15 checks. The system already ahead of time knows those checks so that when our quality team goes in to measure the parts, we're able to then retain that information and spit it out graphically and spit it out into a method where our customers can be very pleasantly delivered this information instead of us having to deliver a piece of paper that wasn't always as professional as it could have been. This has really allowed us to enhance our operations. And then kind of last but not least, it's more of an operational type couple slides here, but I wanted to touch on the culture of excellence and workforce development that can help drive your quality and your business analytics. And IQMS did a great job of taking a bunch of different companies, and probably like many of you, most of your top worries is trying to get and develop a business culture of excellence and being able to develop your workforce to get you that business culture of excellence. One of the ways we've done that and had tremendous success is through what we call a Bright Idea Award. And I don't like presenting without mentioning this because I think it's something that every organization, big or small, can accomplish if it's something that one could care about. And what we've done is if employees come up with an idea that improves workplace safety, improves the quality of our product, improves the throughput or cuts cost, or does something to enhance the company's environmental footprint, they're able to submit an idea, and that idea comes straight to me, the vice president, for initial analysis. And just about every idea is met, and we meet once a week to talk about every idea. Does it make sense as an executive leadership team? And it's a way that every level of the employees has a direct communication with senior management and can really make an impact. Year to date, we've implemented 270 ideas. Some of them range from very simple ideas, but some of them were so impactful as to, with a simple idea, it stopped our team from having to lift over 3 million pounds a year based on one of our metrics. And then last but not least, looking at the different ways of leaning out your plan, getting into 5S, getting things cleaned, organized, and labeled, maintaining equipment, analyzing bottlenecks, and visual tool boards. You can see we used to, our plans up and to the right used to look like that, and with a little TLC, you can see that's the same press as up above. We now have tool boards. We've got clean marked presses. Not only does this help morale a little bit, but if you're trying to make a good part, it's my opinion and our opinion that it's better to make a good part on a good, clean looking plant and press. So with that, I will turn it over to Justin. I appreciate all of your time, and if you have any questions, I'd like to open it up.
Thanks, Jeff. Well, you asked for the questions, and we have a number of questions, and the first one's for you.
Ah, great.
All right, so the first question is, how did Northern Industrial Manufacturing get started on automating manufacturing to improve quality?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. So in terms of the automation, Northern Industrial Manufacturing, we rely very heavily on our employees. And so we're not what the industry would call a fully automated company. But what we've done is we've allowed tools using our IQMS system to enhance our employees' ability to do their job. And so some of the different things I mentioned a little earlier, but something as simple as the quality implementation. Right now, when you look at it in round numbers, we've got about 1,500 parts that we supply, and on average, we take about 10 measurements. So in terms of the quality, if you look at what we've done, instead of our quality technicians having to remember 15,000 different dimensional analysis records, the system, the IQMS system, has all of that ahead of time and has now the ability to just plug in a part number, which is easily known, a measurement, which the operator knows how to take, and everything's done for them. And also in terms of scheduling and planning, what we've done is using screens and production reporting schedules, we can now set schedules for quite a long period of time, 3, 4, 5 days, where prior to implementing IQMS, we were only able to do a couple of hours. You know, you would tell somebody, hey, go run this job, hey, go run that job, or run this job next. Now, everybody in the plant knows and understands what's going to be coming, which really allows for a little bit of autonomy in terms of the individual's daily work.
Okay, thank you for that. Next question is, states, my company has a very large vendor base. What suggestions could you offer as a starting point to manage a vast number of suppliers with little to no vendor management system in place?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we were stuck in the same boat. You know, one thing we did, we analyzed, actually it was funny, as part of our implementation of IQMS, we analyzed our supply chain, and we were buying labels from a company, we were buying boxes from another company. We had 6 or 7 different bolt manufacturers on our MRO side of our facility. And like you find yourself having to manage a supplier that might only, you know, ship you in ever so often. One thing that we did that we really helped us out a lot is we partnered with a local distributor that already had some of our business, but not all. And what we found is actually by going to them, about 85% of what we currently purchase, we have a vendor managed inventory with that company. And to be honest, it actually ended up, when it was all said and done, not only did it save a lot of money in terms of having to manage the vendors, having to constantly be managing all of the labels and gloves and, you know, boxes, I mean, just the bolts and nuts. Not only did we not have to manage that, we cut a bunch of costs there. Not only did we not have to send our driver when we'd run out of a bolt or something like that, but we were actually able to save piece price money as a whole by going to them. And they come every week, they resupply us. And really, we took about, you know, maybe 80% might be a little high, but really 70 to 80% of the part numbers of the SKUs that we purchased, we went with one supplier. We actually saved money on the piece price, and we saved a ton of money and time on the management of the supply chain. That would be one way of doing it without having to necessarily go through a massive, you know, system integration or system implementation. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yep. Okay. Next question is, and I guess this, I mean, we all can chime in on this one. What are the barriers to implementing solutions such as real-time reporting? The reason for the question is that with all the positives for topics like real-time reporting, why haven't companies adopted this sooner, or why is it not a core competency? Jeff, you can start.
Yeah, sure. So I would say without hesitation, one of the issues or one of the barriers to implementing real-time is costs, first and foremost. Depending on your size, depending on the structure, costs can play a role. But let's say you throw costs out of there. Not every type of machine is conducive to real-time monitoring. You know, you need a signal, and if you're going to implement real-time, you need some form of piece signal or batch signal that can be interpreted from some control box and sent to a real-time monitor. In my world, for example, presses, mechanical presses, plastic injection molding machines, very easy. They're sending a one-piece signal up and down through a servo or through a crank that's turning around. But in my world, for example, grinding, it's very hard, it's very difficult to get a real-time monitor on a grinder. I'm not saying it can't be done, but that would be a giant barrier. And then you've also got to have a computational system like IQMS to be able to receive that signal and be able to interpret that signal into some sort of node that triggers, okay, I'm signaling you, which means I've produced a part, I'm back flushing my raw material, I'm shifting my inventory from raw material into bill of material level 1. If you don't have something on the other end to be able to interpret those signals, that too would become a large barrier to being able to adopt a real-time strategy.
Okay. Next question is, QuickBooks was noted as in use for manufacturers with revenues as high as 60 million. What best practice alternative vendor and product for configuration should a manufacturer take to ensure a smooth transition such as setup? I'm not sure I'm following.
Well, so I can tell you what we did, and I'm here almost a little bit on behalf of IQMS, but one of the things you want to do, and really I think all of the firms will tell you this, is when you're looking at implementing any type of ERP software, you want to ensure that you're, first of all, interviewing the key players, do your research. When we were in our selection, I was in charge of the selection process, and we interviewed almost 10 companies, 12 companies, figuring out where their specialties are, what are they good at, Are they familiar with my type of manufacturing process? I'm in repetitive manufacturing. I don't make one thing. I don't make one part and then I'm done with that part. I'm gonna make 50, 60, 70,000, 10 million of one thing. So for me, for my company, we don't probably want to implement a job boss type solution, which is a job shop type environment. Now, that being said, as you look to adopt one that's right for you, definitely interview the players and make sure that whoever is interviewed, make sure they understand your environment, because no one knows your environment better than you do. And so you have to be your own best advocate. If there's any questions whether or not a certain system's right for you, you can certainly always start with IQMS. They're a firm that would definitely tell you, if their technology is right for you. But again, as you interview different companies, you understand what your core capability is. Are you a repetitive manufacturer? Are you a job shop? Are you heavily regulated by the U.S. government? And know what your core is, and then as you're interviewing vendors, make sure you're making that very well known. Because if you don't, and you don't communicate, if you don't know your core properly, and the vendor gets a wrong read, that could spell disaster.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully that answers your question.
Yep. And also to that point, the vendor selection and assessment, is a core competency of Ultra as well. So my information is on the screen, so you could reach out to us if you have any other questions, and you can, of course, also reach out to Lewis. The next question is, how exactly can we prevent the bullwhip effect in a fast-moving supply chain with very fluctuating demand? I'll take this one. And for organizations that have, fluctuating demand, high seasonality, in some cases, we can use systems such as IQMS to put in those factors to factor in seasonality. You can use forecasting methods such as exponential smoothing, and you can also assess your forecasting buckets. So if you do have high fluctuations in demand and demand spikes, you can also assess, going from monthly buckets to weekly buckets. I'm not sure what industry you're in. We would have to receive some more information on that. But the whole foundation is to see how much information you can get from your customers. So when I was talking about CPFR, that whole concept was developed from Walmart, and it was Sam Walton's statement to say, just give them everything, give our business partners everything. We are in a strategic partnership. There's nothing to hide. We'll share all our information. I know in some cases, it comes down to trust, but we have to develop that relationship to build that, efficient supply chain and achieve operational excellence. Hope that answered your question. Next question is for Lewis. Is IQMS adaptable or customized or customizable according to client needs?
Yes, it is, and I'll add the prerequisite that we have customers in discrete manufacturing. Plastics is one of our core strengths. Our system was basically designed in a GE manufacturing plant. Our founder was a GE plastics engineer and was frustrated that he couldn't find an ERP system that met his needs, so he started designing and writing one. And from there, we've grown from that into quality, and it is customizable. So I responded back to you privately as well with my email address, which is up here on the screen as well. And you can write me, and we can have a conversation, and I'll see what I can do to help you as well.
Okay. Then this next question's for Jeff. What impacts have tariffs had on your supply chain?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It's actually one I get asked a lot. Tariffs is having quite a profound impact. But what's interesting about tariffs, so tariffs are going to probably cost us about $1 million this year to our bottom line in increased steel prices. We were fortunate enough to have long-term contracts with our customers and with our suppliers. So some of that has been offset. But what's interesting about, and I don't know if others out there are experiencing this, but we've had a tremendous growth opportunity with companies who are coming into really NAFTA region. What we're hearing from them is Canada, US, or Mexico. And we're able to win quite a few of those programs. So it's going to be interesting to see where it all pans out, because looking at our growth projections, we're forecasting that the tariff issues are going to be kind of short-lived. The steel prices, we're already seeing in many cases a resurgent steel market starting to soften a little bit, especially going here into Q4. But that being said, we're locking down programs here that are really, 2019, 2020 through 2027, 2029, that we feel like might have actually happened because of, I think, this geopolitical tension that we're seeing across the world, and companies wanting to bring business local for local. So they're going to China for China production, they're going to Euro and the Eurozone for Euro production, and they're going to NAFTA for NAFTA production. So yeah, tariffs have certainly cost us quite a bit here in the short run, but in terms of the U.S. steel footprint expanding and the new business that we've been able to get, the jury's out at how much long-term these tariffs are going to be affecting our business. That's a great question.
All right, thank you. I'm going to hand it over to Kia, and I just want to let the audience know that this presentation will be sent out, and I just want to thank you for attending the session. Kia?
Thanks, Justin. I'd like to thank our presenters for their time today and all our attendees for participating in this APICS Vendor Webcast. As a reminder, this presentation will be available on demand on the Ultra Consultants and IQMS website in the near future. You'll automatically receive an email once the recording is available. If you have any questions about today's presentation or Ultra Consultants or IQMS in general, please feel free to reach out to the team via the contact information on the screen. All content and materials included in this edition of the APICS Vendor Webcast are the property of APICS, Ultra Consultants, and IQMS, and are protected by the United States and international copyright laws. All rights are reserved.